Nic Miller, and I'm the Executive Director at the Venture College, which is a program in the College of Innovation and Design at Boise State. We have been partnering with Trailhead and TM Rostegar to deliver this series of discussions that we're calling Survive to Thrive. And really our purpose has been so far to connect individuals and business owners with subject matter experts to share their knowledge about ways that these folks can not only survive through these challenging times, but come out on the other end prepared to succeed. And today we're going to hear from two Boise-based founders, Rod Morris, the co-founder of Lovevery, and Michelle Crosby, the founder of Wevorce. And both of these folks have some really interesting experiences to share. I won't dive too deep into their bios, but both of them are running very successful startups in Boise and are a critical part of our ecosystem. So we're really excited to hear from them today, hear about their experiences, both on a personal and professional level over the past few weeks. And hopefully we'll glean some knowledge about what it takes to not only survive in a startup during these challenging times, but prepare yourself to thrive when eventually these challenging times come to an end. So I know to start out, we were going to have Michelle and Rod just kind of give us a quick overview of their company, their roles within the company, and then we will toss it to TM, who's going to be facilitating the discussion today. So maybe we'll start with Michelle.
Well, thanks for bringing us all together, Nick and TM, to talk about how we're all doing. So it's good to see everybody and see all the names popping up on the side. Okay, so introduction first. So I started Wevorce in 2013 with a mission of finding a way to help millions of families find a kinder way to divorce. And we now have over 1 million families coming each year to Wevorce. And as we were kind of pulling into our milestones at 5 years, we've had to make some serious adjustments through this unexpected turn that Corona's brought us. The biggest one being that we had figured out how to get documents into 3,142 courthouses across the country. It was a big operational investment for us. And just as we had all of that figured out, the courthouses have come to a halt across the country. And so with that, we lost a major channel partner and have had to kind of make lemonade out of lemons and find a way to help all of the families we had in a pipeline who are going through the divorce continue to honor their commitment of what we call peaceful family pacts. And we now are offering a private judge service. So that's a little bit about how we have taken what seemed like an insurmountable obstacle of, do we still have a product if we can't get people divorced? So we built the last piece of what Wevorce is today by offering a complete out-of-court solution under the Uniform Arbitration Act. So now our families can use our software, continue to work peacefully to negotiate it with our mediators, and now meet with a private judge to finalize their divorce out of court. So we've just gotten that started, and it is allowing us to continue helping our families as we go. And we're opening our doors to more and more families. Someone just sent me an article, if China is an indicator, the divorce rates are expected to spike 25% while we are all stuck together inside in isolation. So we're really preparing with a focus on how we help families get peacefully through this and how we continue to offer services while a lot of our justice services are grinding to a halt. How's that for an introduction? Is that enough?
That's great. Thank you, Michelle. We will throw it over to Rod.
I'm Rod Morris from Lovevery. So Lovevery's been in market since November of 2017. I co-founded it with a successful Boise entrepreneur that you might know named Jessica Rolfe. And Lovevery's kind of aim here is to transform parenting for the new generation of parents by basically replacing traditional retail toys with the next generation set of learning products and also really important parenting content that's grounded in child development science and sold by subscription. The business at this point, about 2.5 years in, is at a revenue run rate between 40 and 50 million. We employ 64 folks. I'd say, I think about 55 of those are Boise based. I think if I think about how we're working through this crisis, it's probably along 3 lines. So first, with customer, how can we be empathetic toward our customers and find opportunities to be of greater service to them at this time without doing anything that turns them off or feels like we're taking advantage of the situation, which is kind of a difficult line to tread, but one that I think we're doing a good job of because we're just keeping our values at the forefront. Second is sort of people and team, and what are we doing to make sure that we're supporting our Lovevery team members so that they can all deal with their own personal challenges that come with this crisis, and feel supported by us, and also like they're getting the tools and the support they need to be connected and be productive. And then I'd say the third thing, which is on a lot of entrepreneurs' minds these days, is finance, and making sure that we have proper funding to continue to grow and continue to keep everybody on payroll and everything else. I think fortunately, Lovevery's in a pretty good position there, but we are also kind of among the many applicants for stimulus loans right now, and sorting through that while also thinking through kind of larger fundraise strategy and fielding calls from entrepreneurs who are thinking about raising money and how they're dealing with it right now. So those are the different ways in which I think about it. My bias tends to be more around revenue and the numbers because I'm primarily responsible for revenue, so sales and marketing, digital products, and then also finance at Lovevery.
Yeah, thank you both for those introductions. So as I hoped, the flavor of this conversation is going to focus in part on ways to be, call it opportunistic during this crisis. It's really ways to position yourself in your organization to pivot, to continue growing, to maybe adjust your messaging, but to find ways to thrive throughout this global pandemic. And so far, Survive to Thrive, hence the name, we've focused very much on defensive measures small business owners can take, such as an emergency checklist or how to find emergency funding to bridge the gap, or how to navigate these difficult times with the employees. And so I think it's fitting, as we hear from two Boise-based founders, more specifically around, again, ways to position your organization to grow potentially throughout this and certainly afterwards. And so, Michelle, if I can just start with picking on something you said earlier, the online judge service. So was that something that was done before by someone else?
No, private judges are not completely new to the market. They're generally, you would hear about them in celebrity divorces, right? So it might hit the papers that I think Angelina and Brad, right? Their divorce gets filed and it's very public. And then all of a sudden there's no more information. So they have gone into the private judge model, which allows families, generally higher net worth families, to keep everything confident. And so what we've done is take that model and start to apply it for all of our families and making it affordable. So we really brought down the costs, begun certifying private judges, they become arbitrators. So we've really taken a model that was generally used for high net worth clients and now applied it for everybody.
So has the application of the online model, has it changed your product in essence, is this something that otherwise Wevorce wouldn't have done if it wasn't for the pandemic? And now you look at your product and features, benefits wise, it has improved. Is that the case?
Yeah, I think we've always wanted to create a complete solution for our families out of court. Until this happened, we didn't really, have the courage or kind of the catalyst for finding the solution. So who knows, would we have stumbled upon it? Maybe. It's just one of those things that as we looked around, I think it really became a catalyst of having a pipeline of families that were just stuck. And how were we going to, what could we come up with that would allow our families to continue the process? And so thanks to some sleepless nights and some creativity, we feel like we've been able to really catapult forward with this idea. But I don't think without the pressure, we would have come up with it so quickly.
So in developing this pivot, what role did you play? Were you able to create a small team to go divide and conquer this? Were you at the tip of the spear?
I had to have the courage to become the first private judge. See if Michelle can do it. So it had been 6 years since I had actually been at the table with families. And so to get us started, I've gone back and become the first private judge so that we could very quickly start integrating our systems and evolving them with rapid feedback. So we created a small pilot program that I led with the team, and we just started implementing which structures, systems did we need to change, and ran about 100 families through it, and then started going, okay, this is really working. Now we're ready to start opening the doors. So next week, we are opening the software completely for free to families to go ahead and get started. Again, with the eye of, we're not pro-divorce, we are pro-healthy relationships. And during these times, if relationships are in trouble, the organization and the conversations that can get started in the software sometimes will start to ease that pressure for families. We use facilitators and mediators to start reframing communication, start finding positive ways through this. Again, a lot of our families are dealing with significant financial crisis, which is leading to a lot of stress in families as the unknowns are really continuing to pile upon them. And so what we want to do is start offering that software for families for free to begin getting organized, talking about the kids and changes they need to make, finances they need to make, what changes. It's difficult enough to do this in one household now. So we're really looking forward to helping more families pretty quickly.
Very cool. On that same token, Rod, back to you. So it sounds like Wevorce's pivot was heavily on the product side. And you said something, Rod, that caught my attention. You talked about your 3 focus areas, and I'm glad to have heard customers being the first one. And, how do you continue to service them? I sort of heard you say, that you guys are focusing on finding the balance between the opportunity of growing, but yet maintaining the authenticity of the organization. So help us understand how you approach walking that balance with your customers.
So I'll give you 2 examples, one from, kind of the content and organic side of things, and then another from the sort of just more deliberate, customer acquisition side of things. So on the content side of things, we got together a number of folks on the team, Jessica, myself, some writers, some people who work in social media, folks who work in lifecycle marketing, and kind of early on in the crisis said, what is something that we can do that would help as many families as possible right now, and is likely for them to share with other families. And what we identified was that while we had been creating a lot of content that was oriented around a specific age and stage of a child's life, and then directing that to customers, and then also sort of sharing it, not ad hoc, but without kind of like a core organization because of the platform on Instagram, we hadn't kind of given people one place where they could go to just find things that they could do at home with their child, irrespective of whether they're Lovevery customers and have our products or not. So we worked pretty hard to put a lot of content together along those lines, with an emphasis on what you can do at home, what you can do without need for other products, do with things around the house. Jessica herself wrote a number of pieces and filmed videos. And then we turned it around and published it within a week of starting the work, actually a little bit under a week. That ended up being highlighted by a number of publications around the country as a great way that a company is giving back. It also drove up our daily blog visits traffic by 5x, and just drove a lot of good vibes from customers. But if you know about acquisition and marketing, you also know that those people got pixeled and could be retargeted if they were in the market, right? So on the acquisition side, there's an unusual thing going on for direct-to-consumer businesses right now, where it's really a feast or famine dynamic. So for instance, if you work in travel and you have a direct-to-consumer business, you're having a really hard time right now. If you have a product that people can use at home, then you still can spend money on paid advertising and acquire customers. And at the same time, I mean, this is happening for me in my own home. I'm above my garage right now, and my kids are on virtual school in the house next door. My wife's out of town because she's at a funeral. So I mean, we're all going through it, but like to cope, you're online all the time, right? You're online more than you used to be. So there's more people online, less people are trying to get to them and buy ads. So it's actually a remarkably cost-efficient time if you have a company that's in the right space to acquire new customers. The thing is, you want to do it with a marketing message that kind of lets people know that your product is applicable to this time and place without feeling exploitative, right? Is that a word? I don't know. But feels like it's exploiting the customers, right? So we work really hard to try different ad creative that supports doing things at home in a way that doesn't imply that you're stuck. In fact, we did a test with an ad that used some phrasing around being stuck and that felt a little more negative, and it didn't perform as well as ads that showed comfort, showed connection with children at home, and showed things you could do. And those ads have performed very well. So I think it's a matter of showing empathy in any communication to a customer on any channel, whether it's explicitly to try to build business with that customer or simply be of service. And really, if you're running a mission-based business like ours, there's a lot of overlap there. So that's kind of how we've approached it. Those are a couple of examples with customers.
That was a fascinating analogy with the feast of famine. Let me dig in just a little bit on that side. You said something caught my attention, a bit counterintuitive to think about, that less people are trying to get to all of us who are now online with ads. Do you think is that simply a function of ad dollars not being there anymore when they previously were, or are people just not, advertisers, are they not finding the right channels and ways to target their customers?
I think that it is likely both, but I think that the most fundamental thing going on here is that there are just simply whole industries, let alone businesses, who used to, up until like early March, be major advertisers on Facebook, Instagram, Google, YouTube, etc., who just they can't get the customers because it requires, if the customer's using the service, it requires them to get on a plane, requires them to book a hotel, requires them to go out to eat at a restaurant, go to a gym. I mean, like the list goes on. And there's a chart that's been making the rounds on LinkedIn and other places. Investors have been sharing it, of like the categories that are up, the categories that are down. And it's stark. I spoke with one of our investors, about how we're dealing with the crisis, and they commented, "Oh, good, you're in the 10% of our portfolio that is actually doing okay right now," which we're very grateful for, and feel terrible about the situation that fellow entrepreneurs are in. But shame on us if we don't also sort of take the opportunity to be smart with our own costs. And if there's a more cost efficient way to communicate with a potential customer, go ahead and seize that opportunity.
That's very useful insight. Michelle, on that same note, back to you. Are you doing anything different in terms of your messaging when it comes to customer acquisitions? Are you experiencing growth in customer acquisitions, or are you mostly working with those who have or did work with you prior to the pandemic?
Well, since we appear to be the only ones aligned right now in the market with our new private judge model to help families actually finish their divorce, we doubled last month. So, and we're kind of gearing up for the new positioning. And our space, we always have to be very careful because we can constantly be tripping over ourselves with not wanting to be seen as pro-divorce. So we really do, every one of our families takes a peace pact. It actually is framed within the arbitration model of why families choose this as an out-of-court option. And so we're really angled, a lot of our marketing is around peaceful families, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And so one of the evolutions in our marketing material is that it's an annual subscription, and that we're here for the long run, because peaceful family is not a one-time thing. It's not a result, it's a practice. And so we walk our families through how to address change, how to express disagreement, and then how to connect with a facilitator, a mediator. And if you need someone, the judges are there as well, right? So a lot of our content now has gone into what we're calling microdosing. And as we open the doors to more and more families, just to provide them the tools of how to have peaceful conversations, how to address change. These are just things we're not really trained in, and we're giving away more of these tools with an eye towards, we really do want peaceful families out there. And with all the data we have, all of the science we've collected along the ways of how to have difficult conversations in divorce, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, this is kind of the mantra that we're leading with is, it's okay to have difficult conversations. Here is how. Here are some tips for cooling off if it gets too heated, right? So really integrating in a lot of the spaces of what is happening behind the closed doors of America.
So there's an underlying theme here between, I think, both strategies is to offer up open source your content free of charge for your potential clients or parents in general, or married couples to engage with. And through that engagement process, it looks like you guys do have a funnel that then leads to conversion of customers. And so with that in mind, do you see, and Rob, maybe you can comment on this first and we can come back to Michelle, as there is a potential for growth right now as people are staying home and they're more likely to use your products and engage with your content as they're trying to find ways to, meaningfully spend their time with their kids. Is that going to last? And do you foresee there to be a drop off? And if so, are you prepared for that? Are you positioning yourself for that?
So it's a good question. It's something that definitely we think about all the time. We think about retention all the time. One thing that people have been saying during this crisis is it takes 21 days to form a new habit. And so I like to think that if somebody is experiencing our products and our content and enjoying it while they're at home, that they're going to continue that habit. We are constantly monitoring to see, if people who were subscribing before are canceling now because of economic distress, or making sure that we're creating value for these parents who are subscribing now. Our retention tends to be very, very strong, very high. I'd say best in class amongst subscription products. And so we're optimistic that these recurring customers are effectively going to be of the same value as recurring customers that we would have acquired at any other time. So that's our plan. We wouldn't be able to do that if we didn't have a lot of confidence in the quality of the products and the content that we're providing, but we do. So, kind of we're betting on that in making this move.
Michelle, do you want to comment on that at all?
On retention?
Yes.
Okay, so well, while we are in kind of the midst of this market pivot and product expansion, one of the things that we are offering to families is by offering private judges, we're creating a whole new ecosystem for families, especially ones that are wanting to have peaceful relationships and with all of their agreements. So we will be adding wills and trusts. As our families go through, we're really organizing a lot of their financial information and now are offering to our families a lot of this coming out of, we have one of our biggest markets in San Francisco. And with the pandemic there, a lot of our families have asked for additional help on, hey, since we don't have anything in writing and something happens to one of us, we don't have anything in writing for the kids. Can you go ahead and help us with that? So we are offering additional wills and trusts to our families at that time, as well as real estate hands changing, right? So we're expanding our reach into the contracts that help our families stay peaceful. Real estate, wills and trusts. Navigating insurance right now is tricky. So we're really trying to stay with the life cycle of change and making sure that we just don't drop families right now and here's your divorce award. There's just so much uncharted territory that with our Peaceful Family Pact, we're able to create a whole new ecosystem that's aligning with new contracts that are in the arbitration model as well.
Very cool. We got a question here from the audience around remote working. So can you share with us if and how that has impacted maybe your organization's productivity? Are there any, one-off cool tidbits that you're doing? I know people are doing remote happy hours and dressing up in costumes and try to keep things light. Anything that Wevorce is doing? Have you learned anything from going remote as your team disperses and works from home? Can you just share with us?
Yeah, we actually started this transition 2 years ago when our lease, they sold the King building. So we started iterating on virtual, being a virtual company back then, because we were offering services across the country and we're growing the team that way as well. So we were in the practice, to be honest, I was really the last one that was pretty resistant to it. Took me a while, I'd say almost, it took me a while to get into the flow of it. So here are, I would say, let me see if I can summarize the things I've learned. If you're going virtual, everyone has to be virtual, which we're all kind of forced to do now. Video, I think everyone's on or everyone's off. It's kind of the flow that we've gone. We have some team members that love Zoom and some that prefer to just do the phone. So we're trying to find that balance as well. And then I think we had a model of 110% flex time for our employees. And that has evolved us as a company to really focus on deliverables, not time in the chair. And I'm glad we've done that because as Rod has mentioned, a lot of us are parents. And as we're assuming the role, I think here in half an hour, I have to get on to virtual kindergarten and help my son navigate that we really have evolved as I'd say a family type of company. And allowed ourselves that breathing room to maintain family, community, rest, and work. And I think that's pretty difficult to do. It takes a lot of practice to really find that flow. And it takes a team that really practices grace with each other and supports, right? We like to walk the talk of it's really not easy to do this. And now it doesn't feel like a time of push, push, push. It really feels like a time of support and grace and doing the best we can to get through this and really focusing on the positives because we're surrounded by so much fear right now. And so we're really, as a team, even though we are spread out, trying to stay connected in our routines. And phone, I'm a phone person. My preference is to do phone and then show up for my extroverts that like the video as well. But it is a practice that we're trying to continue. How do you stay connected? and how do we watch the results that we achieve as a team, so that we have the flexibility we need to practice sense and respond, not control and predict. It's a whole different mindset that we're really balancing right now.
So I heard you say grace and support versus push, 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 and that resonated with me. I find myself between the two hourly every single day. So thank you for sharing.
Hard, but you know what cracked me was my admitting to my husband how guilty. I'm going to admit this in front of Rod because I know Jessica's opinions, but I was feeling guilty about the amount of screen time my kids, right? The screens are winning right now. And my husband just looked at me and he said, honey, it's going to be fine, right? It's just this, take a breath. We're all doing amazing things. And it really is a time of grace for sure. So my kids we'll see how it all turns out eventually.
Rod, anything that remote working has unraveled for you?
Let's see. Well, I guess like I'll handle that in two ways. One is just say what we're doing, and then the second to sort of answer the larger question I think Nathan had around like, is it shifting how we think about, you know, just the way that we operate in some way that might continue into the future. I think like I'm going to have much less of substance to add than Michelle, since you know, we're not running a virtual, you know, company at Lovevery, and don't have the expertise and experience that she has doing that. It resonated for me, the word grace as well. I also think trust is important when you're managing a virtual team, which effectively everybody is these days. Things that we're doing at Lovevery, you know, we are doing all hands for the full company being online. Sometimes it's a happy hour, sometimes it's to go over OKRs, it just depends. But we're at least meeting once a week as the full company on Zoom. We're trying to do everything we can to reinforce connectivity with Zoom and Slack across the team, and when we onboard new hires as well. We're also providing childcare stipend and also a stipend for toys and games to provide coverage if people are interested in taking it for help with childcare while they're working from home. So those are all things that we're trying to do a decent job of it. I think that, one other thing that I do is since I'm not in a physical office anymore, one that's part of a job anyway, right? I'm just above my garage. I scheduled a standing office hours Zoom block from 5 to 6 every day during the week, so that if somebody needs to grab me and they don't have like a scheduled meeting or whatever, they know that I'm just going to be sitting there waiting to answer their questions. In terms of how we think about it as a company, you know, going forward, whenever we're out of this mess, I suspect that we'll be better at working with remote employees in doing this. I don't think that we'll pivot to, you know, trying to become a virtual company, simply because Jessica and I both have a strong sort of feeling that that you get a lot of situations where 1 + 1 = 3 when you have physical proximity of people. And that's not to say that we don't seek out and hire amazing people when, you know, they're remote people. Like, I'll give you an example. One of our most brilliant hires is this guy who runs marketing analytics for us, and he lives in Victor, right? He's a ski fanatic, and he's got a Sprinter van, and he rolls up to the Boise offices, you know, every couple months, right? And it's for him, you know, he doesn't. He's got an amazing personality, but he would much rather be, you know, out in the middle of nowhere with his dog and his wife than, you know, in an office full of people going meeting to meeting. So that's fine, and, you know, this experience will probably make us better at working with people like him. But I don't see us giving up office space. We moved into the Athlos sort of office space at 10th and Idaho, I think in late August, and it's been a real asset for us being downtown. We have plans to build out the third floor of that building for Lovevery middle of next year. So those plans are still on deck.
Yeah, it's interesting for me to listen to you. You know, I've watched Lovevery, you and your team. I've watched you guys work together. I've seen the level of intensity when it comes to, you know, collaborative innovation. You got, you know, you guys jump from one conference room into another, ad hoc meetings. You know, next thing you know, there's baby toys and a baby appears and then there's a photo shoot and it all happens so fast. You take those physical interactions or that dynamic out of the equation. And I think about the culture at Lovevery. Has it changed at all? Do you see it being maybe bolstered by becoming better at working with people who otherwise would be better off at working remotely?
I do think that people who have always been remote are a source of constancy and strength in the organization, and you know, kind of like working with them is kind of the way it always has been, and people can look to them and see how they're managing things. I feel really fortunate with the quality of people that we've been able to hire in the business. We hire people who are really self-motivated, autonomous, very nice people. Those are all really important to having people who can function highly in this kind of a situation. And so I feel really, really lucky to have the team that we have. And so I think that's been a help as well.
Very nice. We actually have a question from the audience and I'm just going to jump right into it. Michelle, this one's for you. The question is, how are adoptions being affected with court closings? From foster to adopt takes a long time, even in clear cases. Is that a possible market for Wevorce or too many dependency to make something like this happen?
It's a wonderful thought. So right now, most of the courts across the country are really, everything is coming to a halt except for what they're calling essential hearings. Unfortunately, domestic violence is on the rise with some of this. So those cases are still going through. Safety is paramount for families. And so with adoption, they are coming to a halt now, I think for now, right? So this is one of the interesting times. I set out to kind of blow up the divorce machine, the courthouses, having been a kid that grew up in these systems. Ironically, I didn't see a pandemic, you know, giving me, oh, look, they can't keep going. So we are looking at everything. Again, our mission is to help families get through any transition peacefully. And so adoption is one of those. There are certain technicalities in the law, right? Terminating your parental rights is a big one. If the parties are in agreement, we would be willing to, you know, talk to families and see what we could do. Because right now, not providing anything, right? So our counsel to our company has really always supported us in taking risk to start fixing the law. And so in this one, so long as we keep an eye towards access to justice, and the courthouses have always been cost prohibitive, stressful, time extensive. And so in this case, in this scenario, we're talking about adoption. I would be happy to talk to some families about that needed some help getting through it. The technicalities, of course, they have to voluntarily enter into this arbitration agreement. And then what we do is we kind of work through those courthouses and have those arbitration awards confirmed if and when the courthouses open again. But when they do open, there's going to be such a backlog that many of our families, we don't believe families are a legal problem. It just has legal implications. And so living a full life, a peaceful family is really about capturing those agreements, practicing them. And then, yes, there might be a piece of paper that a judge in a courthouse signs someday. And so we're really trying to open the doors of this conversation and philosophy that we've always believed is that your family has nothing to do with documents. It has to do with how you connect. And we have this rare opportunity to really start having more of those conversations with families. So that's a long lawyerly answer to, we're really focused on helping families. Adoptions would be one of those categories that is stuck, and we're happy to help families start capturing their agreements. and working to build a bridge with the courthouses if and when they are ready to go again.
Oh, that's exciting. It sounds like the online judge solution that you've come up with is potentially transferable to other verticals that are related to your product. That's pretty exciting to hear.
Yeah, arbitration was invented by, here's your law lesson of the day, by Chief Justice Roberts, and as an alternative to the courthouses. So many people are familiar with arbitration clauses in documents. You see it all the time, and it's run by JAMS or AAA are the two main arbitration platforms. And what we are creating is FAMs, facilitators, arbitrators, and mediators for families. And so we would like to be positioning ourselves as really the forefront for family arbitrations.
Very cool. Time for another question, and I'm going to open this one up a little bit to make it more general. The question itself is, as successful businesses pivoting well in this crisis, do you have any suggestions for newly founded businesses that launched just before everything hit pause? So picture yourself having launched Lovevery or Wevorce maybe 6 weeks ago. Anything you would consider sharing with that version of yourself?
I was given advice by the founder of Airbnb early on when we were about 6 weeks into launch at Y Combinator. And I will pass it on because it has really helped me at many stages of wherever we've been. And his advice was, don't worry, Michelle, you'll figure it out. If you don't quit and you don't run out of money. That's turned out to be easier and harder some days. And you really have to love, if you have the blessing and curse of loving the problem you're solving, you can't shake it. So no matter what the turn is, you put one foot in front of the other, putting the pieces together each day. I always believe that money, my father taught me this, money is the easiest problem to fix. If you're doing what you love, the money will follow and others will follow. It becomes contagious. So if you love what you're doing and you don't mind solving hard problems and you don't quit, you'll figure it out.
I love it. Rod, any advice from your end?
That's a tough act to follow. I wish that I could give really positive advice. I mean, I agree with everything Michelle is saying, but I also, having been on the phone with I think the last month, I think 3 different entrepreneurs who had just gotten ready to raise funding. Some were pre-revenue, some were with some traction, and kind of in a panic. Hey, people don't seem to be taking my introductions anymore. What can I do? Should I keep pursuing this? And what I've said to them is what I've heard, which is generally, if you're looking for institutional funds for a business that is just getting started, you're going to have a very hard time right now. It's just really hard out there right now for an entrepreneur trying to get something started. That doesn't mean that you can't be successful, but it does mean that you're going to need to be more resourceful than ever when you think about fundraising, and more resilient than ever. And what that means is having a lot of awkward conversations with family members, with friends you haven't talked to in years, to see if they're interested in investing. And for sure, you're going to need to be able to talk about your business in a way that shows that it's relevant and resilient through this crisis. That's more important than ever. It's likely that you're going to need to be able to show some sort of a path to profitability, because the macro environment for investors has pivoted quite a bit from revenue growth to profit growth. So you're going to need to have your story right for the current context. But more important than that is you're going to need to be able to just confidently move through a lot of awkward situations and conversations. And it's really important that you don't avoid or put off those conversations because you believe that somebody's going to come in and save you with some big check. It's very likely not going to happen. And you should be gritty, and you should be, turning over every rock to find the funding that you need right now if you're in that situation. So sorry, it's not as inspiring. I agree with everything.
I'm gonna put the other inspiration on the other side.
Thank you. Thank you for bookending that.
I'm gonna I'll bookend you then with so I agree with much of what Rob has said. Is now is a time of grit and grace. There you go. But finding the flow is what this is about. There are also new opportunities that didn't exist, new funding sources. Y Combinator has just announced they're like instantly funding anyone who has any decent idea for helping during this crisis. So I just, when I went into Y Combinator, the one thing I do love about entrepreneurs and being surrounded by others in a community is that the human nature and entrepreneurs especially know how to fix things. And at a time like this, although what we knew is melting down around us, we have an amazing opportunity to regroup and find new opportunities and create and help each other. And I do think there are new funding sources coming up. I mean, look, you've got SBA loans out there that I don't know if you qualify yet with just getting started, but I mean, that's pretty much free money. So there are new things coming out every day that I find really inspirational. And when there are a lot of, again, what we knew going down, you're starting to see the sparks of innovation picking up and connecting the dots again. So hang in there, be gritty and graceful, and stay connected to others, keep pitching, keep working it through. Like Rob has said, I find community and strategic thinking really helpful at times like this. So double down on your coffee dates, your virtual coffee dates, wine and wine, whatever it takes to just start talking your way through. I have a tool, I call it the optimal outcome why. And when I really get stuck in the, oh my God, this is gonna be hard, it's like a martini glass with a box on the bottom, and one's for legal issues, one's for the emotional issues, and one's for the financial issues. And what is the optimal outcome that I would really like to create? And so that you're moving from focusing on problems, waiting for the dopamine of the solution to show up, and you're really just starting to innovate, right? And this is where entrepreneurs are good at times like this, is we're very comfortable being like, we don't know what's gonna happen next. Let's create a solution and see what happens. There's your cookie, Rob.
Yeah, you definitely had the entrepreneur's attention there with the martini glass.
Yes.
One thing, Rod, that you've mentioned, it's actually a good way of describing the lens through which institutional money is looking at opportunities right now, the pivot from growth to profit. And, you also mentioned, now is the time, don't avoid those conversations. One of the questions that we've got received actually touches on a conversation that most of us shouldn't be avoiding. And it's around the conversations that we all may have had with our landlords about continuing rent as we may or may not be occupying our spaces. And before I turn the question to the two of you, for Trailhead, for instance, obviously we operate a co-working space. And so it's sort of the essence of our product, or where everything starts, if you will. And our landlords have been very cooperative and very forthcoming as best as they can, understanding that they also run businesses and are dependent on us to pay on time for the cash flows. But there's a specific question. Have either of you had conversations with landlords here locally in Boise, and how did those go? And any advice as to how approach landlords and maybe other vendors who you owe money to?
We have not had any conversations like that with our landlords or with any vendors. So I mean, I think if we were in different circumstances, we might be, but we're working with all of these folks as long-term partners, and they're running businesses as well. So we haven't.
Yeah, we lost a major channel partner and a ton of revenue through this turn. So I have been at a lot of negotiation tables recently. And if anyone needs help with this, we have actually created a framework, again, we've taken what we do with the Peaceful Families and then applied it to what we're calling the Peaceful Business Pact. And it walks the same model. It simply says, here is the change that we've experienced. Here's where we'd like to go. We need to have a conversation. You try it first without any, one-to-one, see how it goes. If you need additional help, you bring in, you work the escalation model, and you're working to get a resolution, because right now there aren't a lot of funds right now to, really, the courthouses are shut down, there's no enforcement, right? Like, so we're in this great time of collaboration. Unfortunately, 80% of people would rather jump out of a plane than deal with a conflict. And so we're trying to get this framework into as many people's hands to give them the confidence and the know-how, just a framework to start working your way through it. And so if anyone wants a copy of that, I'm happy to share. It's just a simple framework of how to begin approaching difficult conversations. They get, you never know what's going to happen. We tend to make up conflicts in our mind until you actually try. And so I'm happy to share that with anyone that might be helpful too.
I mean, I want a copy.
Okay. So I'll just give everyone welcome at Wevorce, or you can email me, michelle@wevorce.com, and I will be happy to share the Peaceful Business Pact with you. And the goal is to get this as many places as possible so that we're creating new ecosystems of resolution, not right and wrong. Because right now, this is something that no one saw coming. And if your cash flow just took a dive, and ours did, and we're doing the best we can to pull out of it, you just have to be able to navigate the change again with grace. And so this pact is really about that, is how do we do grace as a community? How do we do grace, not just with our families, but also in our business and community? So happy to share it. Hope it helps.
Michelle, please make sure to include Nic and I. We have a Slack channel for the Survive to Thrive series, and this is the exact kind of resource we look forward to sharing with the ecosystem here locally. And just from my end, I know we're nearing the end here. I am personally out of questions, but I just wanted to say thank you to both of you for taking the time and talking to us today. From Trailhead's perspective, part of this effort is to ensure that as many of our local startups survive throughout this pandemic and are there when this is all over, so we can, as you said, Michelle, regroup and adjust to the new normal and really launch our comeback, the return of the startups in Boise, if you will. And so that's Trailhead's perspective, is, dip, dive, and dodge as much as we can. And as you and Rod shared best practices and lessons learned, I think we've equipped our local founders here with some additional things they can do. And to top it off, yes, if you share that resource, we'll get it out on the Slack channel for everyone.
Oh, great. I hope it helps.
Thank you.
One last question.
Oh, okay. This is about upskilling. Certifications. So do either of you, have you changed your views as you evaluate candidates in terms of formal education for your degrees, or any kind of platforms like the IDEO or other upskill certifications? Think software boot camps.
I think there are great candidates who come through those boot camps. I think there are great candidates who pivot from one career to another and use alternative forms of education to get there, whether it's to become a software developer or something else. For us, when we evaluate candidates, we take their experience into account. The ultimate test, if somebody makes it to final rounds, is generally some form of a homework assignment. And there's nothing better for level setting to see what the performance is. And really, if the performance is really strong and the interviews are strong, then that's what's most important for us.
Yeah, and we've really, during this kind of pivot, someone said, this sounds a little cheesy, but I really like it, that one of our evolutions is going from being a software as a service company to a love as a service company. And we're really looking for people that want to fortify their skills in facilitation, mediation, and arbitration, because so many of the existing systems are going to fail us. It is now a time to really become better at that, each one of us. We can always work on becoming better facilitators, problem solvers, negotiators. And so I think those skill sets and are going to be really valuable going forward in our new sense of normal.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. And thank you, Rod. Thanks for spending your time with us today. Thank you for sharing your insights, your knowledge. I really enjoyed the conversation and just appreciate you carving out a portion of your day to share your knowledge with our startup community. As TM mentioned, excuse me, we have a Slack channel where we will be putting all these different resources. I'll follow up with each of you if you have suggestions on different resources that you've used, or how we can access your websites and social channels and different things like that. It sounds like there's just a wealth of content from both your companies that I think would serve our community, both startups, families, and all the way through very well. So I will wrap it up there. Thank you again. And for those of you that are tuned in, please look for an email from me following up with a link to all these different resources. And we will be setting the next discussion, likely next Tuesday, with our speakers to be confirmed this week. So thanks for tuning in again. And thank you, Michelle, Rod, and TM. Have a great week, everyone.
Good luck, everyone. Be safe. Bye.
Bye.